Hello and welcome to Heroes and Humans of Football. My name is Mehreen.
And I'm Simon Kuper. This is the football show where we take the hero and we show you the human.
From Johan Cruyff to Megan Rapinoe.
And from George Best to Kylian Mbappe.
This is the Human Football Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of Heroes and Humans. Special in that this week we answer your question, you, the listeners, the most important people on this podcast to whom we pay so far too little respect, but that is all changing now. We're very grateful for your questions, which came from all over the globe, from Britain, Australia, India, Belgium, and many other points. And so here to answer them tonight, it's tonight in Paris where I speak. I'm sort of half watching the Olympics, half being a normal person, are me, Simon Kuper, and coming to us specially from New York City.
New York. Me, Mehreen. I'm kind of channeling my soccer mom look today. I'm integrating.
Yeah, for those who can't see, Mehreen is wearing a spectacular baseball cap.
Some athleisure.
Looks like a celebrity who's imperfectly disguised on the way to the supermarket.
I'm in Midtown. It's been quite a good time to leave England, let's put it that way. So I'm quite happy to be here in New York, but it won't be for too long. Simon, how are the Olympics going? What have you been excited by?
I was at the opening ceremony. It rained like a bastard, as we say, for 3 hours.
Were you on the boat? Were you on a boat?
No, I was on a bridge by Notre Dame, watching the boats come through. It was very touching, and it was Paris at its most beautiful. I did cry a little bit. Aya Nakamura dancing in front of the Académie Française. I'm corny. I like moments of diversity.
Whoa. You cried?
Yeah, maybe when I watch it on video later, because on the night itself, there are big screens sort of on the riverbank, so you get some of it, and then you see the boats coming. And I've been to the Rugby Sevens, to the hockey. Holland beat Belgium.
Big Benelux grudge match.
Kind of, obviously, we're going to beat Belgium. And I was at the tennis, where the French supporters were all on their phones watching Léon Marchand, the swimmer, win gold. And what about you? Can you reveal to listeners why you are in New York?
I'm in New York following the British finance minister, or chancellor as we call her in the country, because she's come out here a month after being elected to woo lots of rich, important people. And obviously I'm not one of them, so I just tagged along to see how she was getting on. But I am going to go to the Olympics probably at the end of this week, just to see the last couple of days, because I haven't been able to enjoy it. I'm going to see some basketball and some breakdancing.
Maybe you'll even find time to see me, unlikely as that sounds. Who does the Chancellor Rachel Reeves support?
She's not a football fan. Her constituency is in Leeds, but the Prime Minister, of course, Sir Keir Starmer, is a big Arsenal fan. So, you have a lot of downtime in these trips. I'm on the plane with her and we get to have drinks in the hotel. And I've tried to animate some kind of football conversation, but it's not going to happen. So I've given up.
You know, the Labour leader by law since, I think, 2010 has to support Arsenal. So Ed Miliband, Keir Starmer, Jeremy Corbyn, the next one as well.
They're all North London boys, aren't they? Which probably tells you a lot about the kind of high concentration of political minds in a certain part of London.
So we come to you from different places. We are here to answer your questions, to resolve all questions, both football and existential, that you have. And so I hope we're going to get a lot done tonight.
We'll be talking through a whole gamut of topics today, including the Olympics and many of the heroes that have been featured in previous episodes. And we're also going to tease a few episodes that are going to be coming up in the next few weeks.
There are also some questions about Chelsea. I'm not sure why.
Maybe we've penetrated the Chelsea massive. I thought maybe in the future we could do like a thought for the day like section. So people want to ask me like theologically based religious questions. I'm all about it.
Yeah, for people who don't know, Thought for the Day comes on Radio 4 in the morning, and it's a cleric giving people theological guidance, which is the point where most British people switch off the radio.
No, they don't. It's very good. It's non-denominational. It's very equal opportunities and equal religious opportunities. And it's a nice break from all of the news, which is usually about terrible things happening in the world. And then you get this nice...
The other day, I was struck when I crossed the road.
Violating. All right. We mentioned the Olympics. Why don't we start there? And a question about the football at the Olympics, which I will admit I haven't been hugely enamored by. Simon, the question we've had, which comes in on Instagram, is does Olympics football really matter at all? What do you think?
It matters to the people playing in it, who many of them will never play anything bigger in their lives. So, I've been following the French team somewhat, coached by Thierry Henry. It's 8 guys, 8 under 23, who frankly, most of them I'd never heard of, although my son seems to know every single one. Lacazette up front, but mostly these are people who are not stars, who are probably never going to play a major tournament. Yeah, of course, they're going to be showing their grandchildren their Olympic medals for the rest of their lives, boring the grandchildren to tears. And then, last night, French men beat Egypt. I mean, by God, the Egyptians cared, so for small countries, and there's a lot of places from non-European and non-Latin American teams in Olympic football. For small countries, this is the biggest thing many of them will ever do. I mean, there was an Uzbekistan against Dominican Republic men's game, absurd as that sounds. And of course, one of the subjects of our podcast, Emma Hayes, has had a bit of a mixed Olympics. So the US women's team, who she coaches, are in the Olympic final, but then the US women's always make the Olympic final, don't they? I heard that she said of one of her players in the press conference, the striker Smith, that she'd been fucking amazing. So good use of the F word in first early appearance in US women's team job. But the team haven't played particularly well. So your woman has not yet, I think, seduced the masses of America yet.
Or even using the F-bomb, I guess.
It's a start. It helps, but it's not enough.
And weirdly enough, even though that there are far more countries competing in these tournaments, we've ended up with a final which is two of probably the best European teams around, Spain and France. Spain have already coming off the back of a Euros final.
Yeah, Spain are going to win everything, aren't they? They're going to win Women's World Cup, Men's Euro, and now they're going to beat Spain in the Olympic final.
We are truly entering the golden age of Spanish sport, soft power, diplomatic influence.
Yeah, it's like being in the 16th century. They rule everything, yeah.
I mean, some of the French players, I mean, if you watch the Premier League, like Crystal Palace seem to be having an outsized importance in this team because Michael Olise, ex-Palace, just gone to Bayern Munich.
Yeah, Michael Olise, he could have played for 4 countries, including Nigeria and England. For some reason, he chose France.
And Morocco, which he didn't play for. Mateta, who had a brilliant end of the Premier League season. So it's quite nice to see familiar faces. I actually think the bronze medal match, usually like the third run playoff between Egypt and Morocco, is also going to be fantastic. So you've got 2 North African nations, 2 of the biggest footballing countries in Africa going for it. So I don't think we should be too snobby about it because it does matter. And let's be honest, as a Brit, I've been watching really weird tournaments and medals and like cheering on like they were the World Cup final in things like heptathlon and like synchronized swimming. So we all take things that we've never really heard of very seriously during the Olympics. So why shouldn't we not do that for football? That's kind of my take.
Yeah, and also, I mean, Olympic football was the original World Cup. So when Uruguay won in Paris 100 years ago, they printed stamps saying Uruguay campeón del mundo, because there was no other way to be world champion other than in the Olympics. And it was then that FIFA thought, maybe we should do a World Cup. And then they sort of totally hijacked the thing. So it's a rare sport in which the Olympics is totally secondary, tertiary. Related to Britain and the Olympics, we have a question from Jorge on X. Jorge asks, or Twitter as most people call it, Team UK competes in Olympic football united, but England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland do not. He says, as a non-European, this just seems to me a relic of a very bygone era. Can there be a UK football team in future? Players like Giggs and Bale could certainly help. Well, Bale certainly couldn't anymore based on his performance at the World Cup in Qatar. But I see your point, Jorge.
I mean, if golf got back into the Olympics, Gareth Bale, my guy's winning gold.
Bale would be great. Yeah. I mean, actually, if you did a thought experiment and you said that there was now a united UK football team playing in the next World Cup, who wasn't English would be in it?
Nope, exactly. It's
Nobody.
just England. That's why it doesn't work.
No, 0. 0, 0, 0. Yeah.
But on a more personal note, if there was a Team GB, I would support them because as some listeners may have already heard, I support GB in the Olympics. I don't support England. But GB or like Europe at the Ryder Cup are teams that I get behind. It's not going to happen, of course, because I think Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland take a lot of pride in their national teams. They do not want to be subsumed by Englishness.
Yeah.
I think it would do more harm than good for relations inside the United Kingdom if we did that, actually.
Yeah, and the smaller countries particularly have this fear that FIFA will then say, well, if you play together in the Olympics, why don't you play together in all international football? And bang goes Welsh and Scottish football. I will therefore be one of the few people ever who has watched the Great Britain Olympic football team at the London Games, where FIFA said to them, you know what, guys, just have a Britain team this time. It's totally not going to affect you in international football. And they were supposed to win gold and be brilliant with Ryan Giggs, but in fact it was just a massive disappointment, as I vaguely recall.
I mean, it's not just, I don't know if that kind of consolidation thing would just affect GB, because I know that there's been talk of maybe consolidating the Belgian and the Dutch domestic leagues.
The leagues, yes, you can't have a Belgian and Holland football team, though.
No, but this whole push that smaller nations...
Don't even go there. Don't.
God, I didn't know you had so much animus towards Belgian.
I don't have animus. In fact, at the hockey, they were doing a joint chant. So the Dutch fans would chant Holland, and then the Belgian fans would chant, but either they weren't sure whether to chant België in Dutch, Belgique in French, or Belgium. Some of them chanted Belgium in English. So there was this weird Holland, Belgium, Holland, Belgique thing going on. So no, we like the Belgians, although friends of mine are very anxious at the thought that Belgium might win the World Cup. Fortunately, that's not a possibility anymore. But I think Dutch people support Belgium until the point where they could win something. But we certainly don't want to play in a national team with them.
As a former resident of Belgium, I'm not going to hear any disrespect coming on their name. Take their name out of your mouth, Simon.
Belgians are cute.
That's so patronising, bro. I don't think anyone would call... Yeah. When
Romelu
Lukaku comes and knocks down your door, you call him cute. Yeah, I'll be there to video that one. Let's see what you got. Let's see what you got to say for yourself.
That would go gangbusters on Instagram, I'm sure. I've never been on Instagram. Okay, speaking of Instagram, we have Suleiman on Instagram asking an interesting question. Was Gareth Southgate a success for England or not? Why don't you lay into him first? We had a big fight during the Southgate episode before the Euro, but now with the evidence of the Euro added, go on, give your all to this kind of takedown of Southgate.
So we haven't spoken about the Southgate issue since our last Q&A special we did on the Euros before the Euro final, in which we spoke about Gareth's future, and we touched upon the speculation that he could end up staying. I said it would be a completely terrible idea. England didn't win. Gareth, I think, to his credit, said that he was going to go off to pastures new. I think it's all kind of, some of the toxicity has died down now, and maybe it's a good time, the dust is settled, to think about his legacy. I'll be honest, I don't think my opinion has changed that much since we recorded the first episode. I think he has been a figure who deserves plaudits, but I'd say he's not a coach. He's kind of a director of football, somebody who's changed a culture inside a national team that really needed culture change. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to put too much, I'm not going to give him much flowers on his footballing abilities, which were on show or not on show during that Euros. Because England, despite getting to the final, they were dog wash, man. It was very difficult to watch.
It's true, but in 50 years' time, after another 50 years of disappointment for the England team, when the anthem is 100 years of hurt hasn't stopped us dreaming, people are going to look back on the Southgate years as a golden age, and people are going to say, you were there when they reached that final against Spain. England used to qualify for major tournaments. So absolutely, this is the golden age, but I agree, it's a slightly tinny and disappointing golden age. The problem with Southgate is that he was quite good at assembling an organised defensive team that did the simple things right, that kept its positions, that didn't punt the ball long and get exhausted, that sorted out the penalty problem. What he wasn't able to do was to make the step to dominant football, to playing sort of Pep, Klopp, Spain football, where you have much better players. So we have the ball, we're on your half, we dominate you the whole game, and usually we win. Southgate's teams never got anywhere close to doing that. The tactics never seemed to make sense. And also at the Euro, the tactics improved. The tactical formation became more sensible as the game went on, which is always a revelation that the manager has got it wrong.
I think posterity will be fine to Gareth Southgate, but I think your theory that we'll look back on it as a golden age, it will be completely invalidated if they get a pretty good manager and go very, very far in the World Cup in the USA. And maybe if they don't win it, if they play with this current generation of footballers who will, be 2 years older and a bit more mature and look like they could be dominant, then we'll just look at Southgate as an interregnum, which is how I see him, actually. A stepping stone to something that could be great.
A huge presence at World Cups have been Argentina in the Messi era, and I suspect that will not continue after the Messi era. So that leaves a bit of a gap on the podium. And also Germany, who were so dominant from, say, the early 70s until 2014, they've also retreated. So it's a much more fluid scene. Brazil have gone, yeah.
Absolutely look like a shadow of themselves.
It's a much more fluid scene than it would have been 10 years ago, yeah.
All right, next question, which is probably directed at me. An Instagram user asked us, can you talk us through what's happening with Conor Gallagher and this situation at Chelsea? So as we record on Tuesday, the 6th of August, Conor Gallagher is going to Atletico Madrid for a reasonable fee, somewhere in the region of 40 to 42 million pounds. I guess what this person is asking is not just about a player gets sold to another team, sure. It's about the business model that Chelsea are now developing, which is about selling their English talent. And this is a story, I think, about how the current rules around FPP, or what do we call it? Financial fair play and profit and sustainability rules basically give a perverse incentive for a club to sell the academy players or the homegrown players that they've developed, because all of the money they get from the sale is basically booked into an accounting year that they get straight away, right? So it's something called pure profit. But when you buy a player, which Chelsea have done now this summer and last summer, for say 100 million, you can amortize that over a period of a number of years. Chelsea are doing it for 6 and 7 years. And that means that you basically get a huge windfall when you sell a player, but when you buy one, you can split the payments up in future years, and it helps the bottom line when the FA come to judge you. I think this has created another perverse, very cynical element of football now. I think the financial rules mean that you've seen this summer for the first time, I would say this is borderline fraudulent activity is happening in the transfer market. And Chelsea, unfortunately, my team, are at the forefront of doing this thing where they're selling their players to a club. So they've just sold this guy to Atletico Madrid, getting 40 million in pure profit. And then they're buying the equivalent talent from other clubs as a sort of bung for the fact that they're getting their pure profit. So this has happened most recently with Aston Villa and Chelsea. Chelsea have paid a huge amount of money, over 25 million pounds, for a guy in Aston Villa's academy, because Aston Villa were taking an academy product for Chelsea, which helped Chelsea meet their bottom line rules. This is terrible. Like, football is already, I think, on the brink of like losing so much good faith from supporters because of how much, commercial and cynical activity and image rights has taken over. But this kind of like weird transfer arbitrage is seriously bad, and someone needs to get a grip on it. I'm just watching aghast that this is allowed to happen, but it's within the rules. It's clearly within the rules, but it's the spirit of the rules means that this is ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous thing that's happening. And Connor's just one example of like how this system is working. I think the FA really needs to get a grip on this.
Chelsea in the last couple of years have been pretty rubbish at buying players, and they're better players, it seems to me, from a distance, are people they didn't buy.
So Chelsea are buying players now that are super young for lots of money because they think ultimately when the asset gets sold, they'll make money on them. Because an 18-year-old that's worth 50 million, when he's 24, he's got to be worth 75 million. Some would say it's a sure bet, but I'm not sure.
No, it's very unlikely to be true. Yeah.
Because we devalue players, and that's what we've been doing for a very, very long time. I mean, Connor's situation is a little bit different because he had 1 year left on his contract. I actually think ultimately playing with someone like Diego Simeone, the kind of style, the sort of high octane football that Conor Gallagher does. We saw that with England at the Euros, the sort of high pressing, some would say running around like a headless chicken kind of football would definitely suit Simeone. It's not going to suit the new Chelsea under this Maresca team. So I'm sad to see him go. I'm not too sad to see him go, but I do think the financial arbitrage thing that's going on between clubs, it's making me like, I'm sort of at the edge of just like giving it up and going to support a championship team at some point, because it's just rubbish.
And on the field, how disappointing are Chelsea going to be this season?
Well, in a couple of hours, we're playing Real Madrid. I'm in North America, so I will be able to watch it. I think I'm going to make Rachel Reeves watch it as well, to be honest. We're getting slapped up all over the field in pre-season, but I'm not going to be one of those people who says, oh, pre-season's super important. If we can finish in the top 6, I'll bite your hand off. So come when we do our end of season H&H supporters club, ask us how it went. This is my prediction, top 6 for us.
Let's end with Chelsea because it's a depressing and dispiriting subject that doesn't benefit anybody. We have a question from Opta BBQ on Instagram who asks, can you settle the eternal debate? Who is the GOAT of football? Can I briefly answer that definitively?
We obviously know who you're going to say, but say it anyway. Go on.
You can't compare players from different eras. So was Pelé better than Maradona or than Messi? I mean, who knows? The thing is that Pelé and Maradona and Cruyff were not really concerned with being brilliant week in, week out, playing at the highest level of football, because that's just not the way football was structured at the time. So Pelé was playing all these exhibition matches all over the world with Santos. He stopped playing for Brazil when he was about 29, and then he spent what for Cristiano Ronaldo would be peak years, Pelé spent them in the United States. So he wasn't really pursuing week in, week out excellence. Cruyff was a chain smoker his last 3 or 4 seasons of Barcelona, which is, until about the age of 30, he's already fading. Maradona was a cocaine addict. He turned it on at the 1986 World Cups and occasionally when he wanted. The best players week in, week out in the history of football were before now Alfredo Di Stefano, say in the 20th century, Alfredo Di Stefano, who was playing in the best club in the world for a very long time, won, I think, 5 European Cups, but then outpaced in terms of week in, week out brilliance by Leo Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. There is nobody in the history of football who has been excellent for so long, week in, week out. Brief name drop. I interviewed Roger Federer again for the Financial Times last week. It's in the newspaper now. And I asked him about Messi because Federer is a big Messi fan. And he, talks about the parallels between their careers and how athletes today are much more incentivized than in the past to go on very, very long and to keep performing. And also the kind of healthcare and nutrition around it makes it possible for them to do it. So Messi and Ronaldo have had careers that Pelé and Maradona could never have had. So just factually, week in, week out, they are the GOATs. And Messi is best. Messi's clearly better than Ronaldo if you look at the stats. But if Messi hadn't existed, Ronaldo would be the best player in the history of football.
I remember a time when we spoke about football and nobody gave a toss who the GOAT was. I feel like maybe because I'm in North America, this is part of the kind of the introduction of an Americanized sort of debate around players, which is also an import of incredibly stats-heavy analysis of football, of soccer, which Americans have been doing for a long time with the NFL and basketball and baseball. Like there's always been a heavy statistical element, empirical element of judging performance, which has now really been brought into the UK. Things like XG now are like a normal way. And I don't know, I just can't help thinking that this is a part of an Americanization sort of thing. I don't think this is organic to like how Europeans have thought about football for a long time.
I mean, I would put this down to your youth and immaturity because when I was growing up, people did talk about Pelé and Cruyff and later Maradona as the greats. So sort of,
but
we didn't use the word GOAT. It wasn't tribal.
Or
only
a sectarian
stupid,
debate, right?
Stupid people are tribal, but there was genuine conversation about who was the best player in the world. I remember when I was about 10, I read this Jimmy Hill ranking of the best players in the world. I was fascinated by it. And I think what changed is there weren't that many great players other than Maradona, people who could legitimately claim to be the best in history, between, say, Cruyff going in the late 70s and Messi and Ronaldo appearing in the early 2000s. So you have Maradona, but he's not really there every week. And so you have people winning European Footballer of the Year, like Kevin Keegan, Alan Simonsen, Michael Owen, who were very good footballers, but nobody in their right minds would make a case for them being the GOATs. So there just weren't people around who were candidates to be GOATs. And I would say in football, the reason we talk about it is that both Ronaldo and Messi have a very serious claim to be the GOAT, and we have lived through them.
And there is a different, I think the OG GOAT debate, as far as I can tell, even though you think I'm young and stupid, is in basketball.
No, not stupid, but immature and poorly educated.
Borderline moronic, yeah.
Semi-literate.
Is that...
But not, what was the word you used? Moronic? Yeah, not necessarily. Yeah.
Oh, okay, you're nice. Is Michael Jordan... in basketball, so Jordan's always compared to LeBron and Kobe and these guys, but Jordan is actually definitively playing in a different era of basketball. But when we talk about the GOAT debate in football, I don't really think people bring Pelé and Maradona into it. But
no, because it's just statistically it doesn't add up.
They don't, yeah.
And there's very little of them on video. So I mean, I was alive when Pelé was playing for the Cosmos, and I might have seen like 10 minutes of Pelé on film in my life. There just isn't very much.
I'd also be happy never to speak about this debate ever again.
Okay, it's done.
Sorry. Definitive, it's done. All right, let's do a bit of a quick fire round. And for this one, we're going to name a couple of figures, some of whom have appeared on episodes, some of whom will be appearing on future episodes. And we're going to designate them as hero or villain. But I'm going to put a massive caveat here and say that hero and villain is not necessarily a binary category, especially for me, because I love a villain. Right?
Yeah, all your heroes are villains.
Exactly,
except one who we're going to come on to on this list, who is just a hero. I think the idea that there are people in football you should hate is almost always bad and wrong. So yeah, it's just...
Apart from Stephen Hunt, who played for Reading and kneed Peter Cech in the head and nearly killed him, I think I'm allowed to hate him. Sorry.
Right, okay. I'll give you that one. Yeah.
Thank you. Right, let's go with one of your compatriots of some sorts. Dennis Bergkamp.
Bergkamp is obviously a hero. He doesn't have any villain in him at all, although he would sometimes stamp on defenders and kick people, because Dennis had this very moral view of football. He thought it was wrong that defenders should be allowed to foul him, so he kicked them as punishment. More than any footballer I ever watched, I watched him a lot, especially at Arsenal in the late 90s when he was sort of the most beautiful player in the world. He saw himself as an aesthetic creator. So he was like a painter. He was pursuing a vision of aesthetic beauty, which wasn't really connected always with winning football matches. So Dennis would drift out of games, he was trying to create these moments of beauty. So like, that turn past Nico Dabizas against Leicester, where he kind of does this 360-degree turnaround, this flick to Freddie Ljungberg, put him in front of the Juventus goal. He was about creating these moments of beauty, and then the rest of the time he would not really be able to sustain that level of concentration. He'd wander around the field. And so I felt that Tony Adams definitely won more matches for Arsenal than Dennis did. Ray Parlour probably won more matches for Arsenal than Dennis did. So he wasn't so much the greatest winning footballer, but he was the most beautiful footballer I've ever seen. Last thing, I was for a couple of years at this Dutch football quiz evening, organized by a comedian with some ex-footballers, journalists, coaches. And one night we got talking. So who is your favorite Dutch footballer? This is in Amsterdam, everyone steeped in Dutch football. People like Guus Hiddink are there, Danny Blind. And we went around the table and we agreed Johan Cruyff has to be out of competition because obviously he's everybody's favorite Dutch footballer. And the consensus was everyone's favorite footballer was Dennis.
Really?
Yeah, just the beauty, he did things on a football field that you'd never seen before. The kind of sense of geometry, the sense of space, the touch of the ball. You wouldn't want him to play the football match that saved your life, but nobody did it more beautifully. So yeah, I would say my favorite footballer after Cruyff, yeah.
Not a university shared opinion. I'm just going to say that because one of the most interesting takes that I've heard on Dennis Bergkamp in recent years was from Gabriele Marcotti, so ESPN football journalist, probably someone you see quite a lot on on the trail.
Yeah, he tried to help me find my seat in Munich, but he couldn't.
Oh.
Anyway, long story, go on.
Like, you not finding your seat in Munich is like so symptomatic of like your basic life.
It was terribly, there were no signs anywhere.
Did your phone die as well? Yeah, your phone died.
It was a complete disgrace. I complained to a lot of people. Okay, so what was Gabriela's take on Dennis? Was it probably wrong, but tell us.
I don't want to do Gabby a disservice, but I just remember watching a debate and Bergkamp comes up in one of these perennial GOAT things and Gabby's just sort of like, I don't like him. I've never liked him. I found him cold with that weird Aryan stare of his, those blonde hair, blue eyes, the moralism, the puritanical thing that you've just mentioned. He actually spun that all as a bad thing. So I'm kind of like, maybe there is a villain inside Dennis Bergkamp.
Yeah, Gabriela is an Inter fan and Dennis went to Inter from Arsenal. And you had these old Inter blokes like Zenga and Franco Baresi's brother. And they didn't like to have somebody new in the team. So they bullied him. And he's quite easy to bully because he's an introvert. He's a kind of somebody who doesn't like to express his personality in public. Yeah, he was kind of bullied out of Inter. So I could see that if you're an Inter fan, then you completely missed the point of Dennis Bergkamp.
And Gabby, maybe we can get him on for a future Dennis Bergkamp episode. Let us know. Write in if you want to see that happen.
Yes, we will debate Gabriela and I will unload my lifetime obsession with Bergkamp.
Excellent. Next one, Florentino Perez, long-standing president of Real Madrid, hoovering up trophies, probably the most, infamous? One of the most infamous political figures in domestic football in the world. Everyone seems to know who he is.
He controls Madrid like an autocrat. It's very unlike Barcelona, where the president is more like a parliamentary system. In Barcelona, the president is always fighting with lots of vice presidents, with the media. President has to get re-elected. At Madrid, Florentino gets elected every time, like Vladimir Putin, and there's not really any dispute. The most interesting thing I've heard about him, our friend John Carlin, friend of the show, he was a guest in our Pep episode. He was quite close to Florentino, maybe still is. And at one point, he gets invited into Florentino's bedroom. And above the bed, Florentino shows him, is an enormous photograph of the Galacticos. Hanging above Florentino's bed is a picture of, if I have this right, Ronaldo the Brazilian, Zidane, Roberto Carlos, all those other guys. And it's Florentino's proudest possession. And John Carlin said He writes, imagine what Freud would have made of that. What a brilliant thing to take to your psychoanalyst.
He's definitely going to be worthy. It's, I think, a worthy subject of a future episode. I think we've got to hit that one. We can get John back on too.
When you say we'll definitely get John back on for the Florentino episode, and then John can forever sabotage his relationship with the most powerful man in Spain. Okay, now we come on to a man who will very soon be the hero of a Heroes and Humans episode, N'Golo Kante, or as they call him in the French team, NG. Mehreen, I'm going to ask you an open door question. NG Kante, hero or villain?
Yeah, so I think this is going to be the exception that proves the rule. So he's definitely a hero, and he's my GOAT, as we're going to find out in that episode coming up in a couple of weeks. Probably the most wholesome, respected, smiley, pure footballer in the modern era. Probably the antithesis of what most people think footballers are. And he's also just very, very good at his job, as Americans say. He's very, very good at his job. I think probably underrated because he doesn't come with so much of the ego and the self-obsession or the commercialism that a lot of famous and very good footballers attract. We have a lot in common, as I discuss in the future episodes. So for me, N'Golo Kante, unadulterated hero. If he does have a dark side, I'd probably just love him more. Let's be honest.
If he is your favorite footballer ever, who is your second favorite footballer ever in your life?
Zidane.
Right.
I'm going for the Muslim boys here, obviously. People may have noticed. And then Zola's got to be up there because he's the guy that got me into football, and he's the reason that I watched this game and I got into this game. So those are my top three. Next one, we've spoken about Belgians before. Perhaps the greatest Belgian footballer of the modern era, if we take out Kevin De Bruyne, Eden Hazard. He's complicated, right? Eden, of course, somebody that lit up my life for a very good number of years at Chelsea. Career really petered out in a terrible way. His reputation was sort of battered by being at Real Madrid and sitting on the bench, put on lots of weight, famously loves burgers, and was a bit too honest about it. I think that was his problem, like a classic Belgian. I don't think he's a hero or a villain. I'm not sure I can put that self-identifier on him. Next one, Antonio Conte. Again, another Chelsea connection. For me, gotta be all-time top 5 villains of football. A bit like the Tuchel episode, really does not have control over his temper. One of the most successful hair transplants of all time in football, so maybe he's the GOAT of hair transplants. But yeah, tempestuous, capricious, completely mad, manages to win things, but even perhaps more egregiously than Tuchel, can only last about a year at any club before everyone's had enough because of the mental torture that he puts everyone through. Villain, and that's a good thing. I'm going for villain.
I have this recovered memory of watching him play for Italy against Spain in Boston 30 years ago. And he looked like a lunatic. I mean, it was quite a close match. It was very tense. Italy win kind of at the last gasp. But they have this crazy person running around in central midfield, shouting at people, kicking at people. And it was clear this man would not be able to cope in civilian life. So we agree.
That wraps up the Quickfire section. Join us after the break when we're going to be answering more of your questions, including on perennial Heroes and Humans subject Pep Guardiola. We'll also look forward to the season ahead and answer some questions about Simon and I and how we got together to do this podcast. Join us after the break. Are you loving listening to Heroes and Humans every week? Do you hate the wait between our weekly episodes? If so, why not join our official H&H Supporters Club on Patreon? This exclusive community is the place for behind-the-scenes sneak peeks, Q&A opportunities with me and Simon, and more bonus content. The link is in the episode description and on all our social media bios.
This is a reminder that you're listening to Heroes and Humans of Football with me, Simon Kuper.
And me, Mehreen Khan. Welcome back to Heroes and Humans, where we are answering your questions in a special episode. And we've got one from Alex on X who says, Simon, do you think that Pep will become to City what Johan Cruyff is to Barcelona, e.g. defining the club's culture and DNA forever and ever?
I mean, there is a parallel in that both clubs are quite old and venerable by the time the great man comes along. But they have not been particularly successful before the arrival of the great man. So it's under Cruyff that Barcelona win their first Champions League. It's under Pep that City win their first Champions League. And then there's a period of sustained brilliance. In City's case, sustained for longer, but Cruyff really leaves this imprint that lasts after him. So, yeah, I think that if you were looking at the world's biggest clubs, these are two very rare people who can transform those clubs sort of after nearly 100 years of existence, in Barcelona's case and many more in City's. City, of course, founded in the 19th century by the anti-masturbation White Cross League, also on Main Road, named for a temperance leader. So City combined the two great Victorian forces of anti-masturbation and temperance into what is for a very long time an unsuccessful football club.
There we go. That was your thought for the day section about temperance and not masturbating. See, it's easier than you thought.
I was speaking as a sociologist and not as a theologian.
I'm quite interested in how this story ends with Pep and Man City. And when we do our episode on Johan Cruyff and Barcelona, the endings are always a bit difficult. And we know that this season there could be a potential plot twist because those 115 charges that are being labelled at City, there's going to be some form of a legal process that starts. And Pep has been on the record and said, if City are found guilty of any kind of malfeasance, he's out the door. So maybe the parallel is going to continue because he could be not booted out, but the end could be a bit sour and not the sort of dream Hollywood ending that perhaps we thought would happen when Pep eventually decides to depart City.
Do you think he will leave by smashing up his office like Cruyff did at Barcelona?
That's a good teaser for our Cruyff episode.
Yeah. I think I describe it in the Cruyff episode, yeah. It was quite spectacular. Okay, we have a question from Jonas HG, that's how I'm pronouncing it, on Instagram, who asks, has football become too robotic since post-Pep's Barcelona? And is empowering athletes to make their own decisions a dying method? What is your view, Mehreen?
That's very interesting. And I think this is a debate which is coming up now. And perhaps the most interesting intervention in this debate that I've heard in a long time actually came from Lionel Scaloni, the current World Cup winning manager of Argentina, who I think a couple of months ago he did an interview with Marca and they asked him, all the general questions you ask a manager, but they asked him something like, what's missing in today's modern football? Like, what are we getting wrong? And he gave this really powerful, emotional sort of plea for managers to stop overloading players with information. And actually, he used the phrase, stop turning them into robots. He thinks that it's stripping something, some sort of essence, and as Jonas asks us, some sort of creativity or instinct from the game. Because every time a player gets a ball, he's overloaded with information about what he could potentially do, who he could pass to, his own positioning, how to set up the play from wherever he is on the pitch, how to prepare for the next pass, etc., etc. Right? This is what modern football looks like.
But the sad thing is, it usually works better than letting him be completely autonomous.
It works so well. So we've now accepted this as like an unadulteratedly good thing. But Scaloni, and I'm going to quote this, he says, in our case, and I don't know how it is with other teams, but you risk losing the essence of taking away from the player what he has best. If you're constantly telling him what to do, that is a risk. He says, that not only at the professional level where we see the highest standard, but this is happening at the very, very grassroots form of football. So children everywhere in clubs and local levels across Europe are being told to play this way. He says, my children play in Spain and they're already overwhelmed in information. They receive the ball and already are being told what to do. And Scaloni's kind of, criticism is that not all children are able to handle this level of information, and maybe they won't then get selected for under 15, under 18, under 21's level, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not because they're good players. And he says Messi is exceptional because he's able to absorb and has always been able to absorb this huge amounts of information. But so many younger players aren't, and maybe we're missing something if this is the sort of barometer by which we test whether they're going to be able to become footballers. I thought it was very interesting from somebody like Scaloni, who's a young manager who's obviously already been incredibly successful, and a sort of plea for a bit of a correction, I guess, and that sort of seems to be what the question is getting at too.
Or soccer could take it to the max and it becomes like American football, where players have virtually no autonomy. Yeah. The quarterback has a little bit, but broadly you're just running patterns.
Yeah, you run routes. I don't think we'll get there, but I think it's a debate worth having. And I think that if there is going to be some sort of correction, it will have to happen now. Having said that, another thing that we've always touched upon in previous episodes is the fact that any manager today operating modern football who's either played under Pep or somehow been in his ether are now getting the biggest jobs in football. We should mention the fact that Vincent Kompany, who was relegated with a pretty bad Burnley side, is now the manager of Bayern Munich. Perhaps the biggest career jump, deserved or undeserved, that you could possibly imagine. And it wouldn't ever happen in any other types of profession, but it must also be because Kompany in some ways is in one mold of Pep Guardiola, and there are many, many others. Thiago Motta, who's just got a job at Juventus, Xabi Alonso, who's incredibly successful by Leverkusen, Enzo Maresca, who I will admit I hadn't heard of about 6 weeks ago as Chelsea manager, because he was assistant manager to Pep and has absorbed some of Pep's methods. So, he's got a job. Why not? Manage Chelsea.
Erik ten Hag, Manchester United manager, was Pep's second team coach at Bayern Munich. Yep. If you've worked with Pep, if you've been anointed.
The proliferation of the Pep robots, right? The Pep clones are taking over management. So I think maybe Scaloni is his plea is going to be falling on deaf ears. And on a related theme, next question, again on Instagram, Simon, is about the greatest managerial rivalry of all time. Is it Pep versus Klopp? Is it Sir Alex Ferguson versus Wenger? Is it Jose Mourinho against the entire world? What do you think?
The greatest managerial rivalry of all time is Mourinho at Madrid against Pep at Barcelona, because for a great managerial rivalry, you need two great managers who are contrasting figures, whereas Ferguson and Wenger were almost the same person in many ways. And they have to be managing clubs that are themselves rivalrous, which Arsenal and Man U weren't, which City and Liverpool are not. So I don't think we will ever match the peaks of managerial emotion that we experienced in the years of Mourinho gloriously misbehaving against Pep's Barca.
I think I'm going to add in Mourinho and Wenger when he was at Chelsea and Wenger was at Arsenal, because I think even though the managerial rivalry was so poignant when Pep was involved, Pep basically never rose to the bait, right? Whereas Wenger really let it get under his skin. And they just squared up to each other. Like they were literally about to headbutt each other on touchlines.
Wenger also squared up to Ferguson, remember, in Pizzagate, which I think is the best untelevised episode in the history of football.
I know, if only we could have seen it. So I agree with you that, basically it's if Mourinho's involved, it's going to be pretty good. And when he can get under people's skin, and he really, really did with Wenger, then it's even more entertaining to watch. If you want to hear about how Pizzagate unfolded, we have a special two-parter on Arsene Wenger, the rise and the fall, which you can go back and listen to, where we tell the story of what I think is ultimately quite a tragic but lovable figure in Arsene.
He would hate to be called both tragic and lovable.
I know. Let's look forward to the season ahead, and we've got a question which comes all the way from India on Instagram from a user called the Indian Football Podcast, which I imagine is exactly what it says on the tin. But Indian Football Podcast asks us, with the change in sporting structure at Manchester United, is the club starting to move in the right direction? And what would be a realistic goal for Erik ten Hag this season? Simon, we have an episode on Erik ten Hag coming up where we talk about some of these questions. But why don't you give us a sort of summarised, concentrated version of what we think is going to happen to United?
Well, Ten Hag wanted to control the whole club and be a total manager like his dad ran the family's real estate company, and that obviously has not worked out. So yes, now they're trying to divide the roles again. I think that because Jim Ratcliffe chose and has backed the people in the new roles, they will actually now divide powers in United, so it might actually work a bit, whereas the attempted new structures haven't worked for a decade. What would be a realistic goal for Ten Hag? It would be finishing third. I just can't see that United could be better than City or Liverpool, surely.
And as we discussed in the episode that Erik ten Hag sees himself as a CEO, he had an experiment of trying to be CEO, did not work out. I think he's now been shunted to the realm of a COO, if we're being nice, a chief operating officer, because he's definitely not in charge of transfers anymore.
I would say he's the interim coach.
Ouch. And we'll also discuss whether Rune van Nistelrooy is ready to come and nick his job in that episode.
I mean, United might be dumb enough to appoint him like they were dumb enough to appoint Solskjaer because he used to be a great United player, which is a really stupid reason to appoint a coach. I can't believe they would make that mistake again. There is no evidence in Van Nistelrooy's career that he is a great football manager. We have a question from Ahmed on Instagram who asks, I think he's trying to provoke you here. Can you give any insight into Chelsea? What are we expecting from their 40-man squad, in brackets, 8 goalies? Do they already have 8 goalies?
No, we do not have 8 goalies. We have 3 goalies. in the current squad and a couple somewhere on loan, according to this. Yeah, I mean, it's always an emotional roller coaster with Chelsea. Can I give any insight? Not particularly, because I'm watching it all unfold.
Okay, sorry, Ahmed. No, nothing.
Sorry, Ahmed. The answer is actually no, but I can just rant and rave and give you a overly emotional insight. I mentioned at the top of the episode that I think if we finish in the top
the producer,
6...
can we mute her at this point?
I mentioned at the top of the episode that I think we can finish 6th. I think Chelsea are in a process of moving again, another transition season, another trust the process one. This time we've got a bold guy that sounds a lot like Pep Guardiola, and if you squint, maybe it looks a bit like Pep Guardiola too. So we'll find out very quickly on the first game of the season whether he is like Pep Guardiola, because we're playing Pep Guardiola's Manchester City. So I feel like Chelsea's season, the tone is going to be set very early on in that first match. So I'm sorry, Ahmed, I have no insights apart from praying.
We have other questions which seem to be targeted at your strengths. So an Instagram user asks, who is your FPL starter squad for this season? I looked it up, and FPL means Fantasy Premier League.
Do you not actually play?
I've never played a fantasy football game in my life.
Are you mad?
Okay, who is your FPL starter squad for this season?
All right, I'm reading them out. I've just managed to get this sorted. For those not interested, please skip ahead. In goal, we have Vicario, Tottenham's Vicario, and Verbruggen, who now plays for Brighton. Not bad. My defence, Anderson, Vestergaard, Malo Gusto, Udogi, Levi Colwill, Mohamed Salah, Cole Palmer, Harry Winks, Wharton from Crystal Palace, and Alvarez at West Ham. Up front, I've got big guns, Erling Haaland, Ollie Watkins, Euros hero, and Visser from Brentford. I think it's a pretty respectable team. Let's see how we go. That's me. So if you guys want to sponge off my knowledge or lack of, there you go. That's my team. I have also set up a Heroes and Humans Fantasy League. If you want to join and compete against Simon, who's obviously not going to be able to log into the app for weeks at a time and therefore is going to lose, you can find the link in our show notes.
Okay. Avik on X asks, which footballers are Brat? One man and one woman, please. Can you also just clarify what is Brat? Or
this is a part of the kind of cultural education of yours. So I'm in America, of course. Kamala Harris, who wants to become president in a couple of months' time for the Democrats, has been labeled Brat by the internet.
Just give us a one sentence. What is Brat?
Right. Charlie XCX, she's a singer. She's got an album. It's called Brat. And she's kind of used it as an epitome of a characterization, usually of a woman who is kind of a baller in her own way, but takes Brat to know Brat, right? Kamala has been anointed Brat by Charlie, and Brat has become like this huge viral meme sensation, which Kamala is really leaning into to try and get young voters to vote for her. But I think there are a lot of footballers that are Brat, and I said this on Twitter. For me, if we're going to say who's Brat, for me, Jack Grealish, ultimate Brat. Loves a party, complete madman, pretty inarticulate, a bit like Kamala Harris sometimes. I don't know if he loves Venn diagrams. Maybe he does. But he's Brat to me. Jack Grealish.
So there has to be a tinge of bad behaviour?
Cringe behaviour. Kind of like... some likability factor about them. I think Jack Grealish definitely has that. I'm going to go with... and if we think who's having a Brat summer, it's definitely Jack Grealish. Did not get selected for England. He's probably been partying his brains out somewhere in Spain. And having the best time of his life. And now he's turned up to pre-season training, with a hangover.
And to complete the question, name a woman footballer who is Brat.
I also put this in my tweet. I said Mary Earps, so legendary England goalkeeper who won Sports Personality of the Year. She's Brat for me because she's just a baller. So we're going with her. Mary Earps, Brat.
Okay, I'm not even going to delve into the vocabulary that was just used.
You can't even counter these points. This is my favourite kind of question.
Yeah.
All right, Simon, we've got one for you from Susie on Instagram, who wants to know, of all of the great players you have interviewed, what's the biggest commonality? So what's the theme that they all seem to share?
I would name two things. One is that they're just quite nice. So the thing is, when you interview a great footballer, you have to kind of shed the fan thing and not ever take a selfie and treat them like a normal person who is good at football. So you're polite and respectful as you would be if you're interviewing somebody who worked in a cafe, but you're not overawed at all. We're just two humans talking. Do I name drop here? I've interviewed...
Yeah, name drop. Do it.
Maradona and Cruyff and Neymar and Mbappe. And I found them all, quite likable.
Cruyff wasn't that nice to you.
No, he was likable. He was likable
find out where it all goes wrong.
Yeah, but he was likable when we were there, because when you're with somebody, when you're with most people like each other. People, if they're treated respectfully, they get on. And if you ask people questions, they like to talk about themselves usually.
But are they seducing you?
No, not really, because they don't really care.
Okay.
I mean, they all that's really being asked of them is politeness. They don't really even have to show it. They can just, say forget it and answer 2 questions and walk out. Footballers don't really have to sell themselves. I mean, you think of Messi, he went many years without giving an interview or a press conference, and he was still Messi. You just have to play. Beckham never really spoke for years and years and years. He only learned to speak when he was about 40, and it didn't matter. He was still Beckham. So they operate in a kind of visual world like Charlie Chaplin or Marilyn Monroe. They don't have to do any public relations.
It's not the medium, is it? It's not their medium, is it? But I mean, have you had any horrific experiences beyond the Cruyff
fight
debacle?
with Cruyff? I mean, Edgar Davids came up to me and he said, "You're badly dressed."
Facts, bro. Oh my God, Edgar Davids. Bro. Finally, somebody else has said it.
I didn't find that,
that's
polite.
Rude.
Yeah, it was rude. Yeah,
did he say it in Dutch?
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
That's deep, man. That's deep. He said it in Dutch. We're wrapping up. We're coming close to the end. And we've got a question about us. Tim on Instagram says, best football podcast in the world. Thank you, Tim. How did you two meet and how did this relationship develop? Simon, you just said that when people meet each other, they always like each other. Was that true with us?
I think we liked each other. I think it was at a festival in Ireland where we were both going to speak, sent by the FT. No, where was it then?
It was in the FT Summer Festival.
Oh, God. Right. In Kenwood, coming up again soon. Kenwood House in London. Yeah.
I was hosting an event for FT readers called at the FT Weekend Festival with you, Simon, and Janan Ganesh, and it was about leadership and managers and
that's
that
the only
kind
time
of
Janan has ever spoken to me in my life. Wow.
Yeah, and I think in comparison to Janan, who's very elusive and mysterious, you seemed quite normal actually. So we did get on, and that was, I guess, the beginning of it. We met. We were colleagues at that time. You were still based in Paris. I was in London. We got talking about football, and then we just kept bumping into each other and sort of.
Yeah, mostly at these festivals in Ireland where we have both been to repeatedly. Yeah.
Yeah. You're obviously known for being a bit of a football brain. I have always written in my professional life about subjects that are very far away from football. But I mean, I've mentioned previously, football is such a kind of cheat code in journalism because it allows you to speak to people across demographic and sociocultural spectrums. And we hit it off.
Yeah, I mean, with you, I feel that football, you do use it as a cheat code, but you are one of the most genuinely football obsessed people I've met in my working life.
Yeah, I mean, it's not helpful in my life at all for me to be this interested in football. It's not transactional in any way, but I genuinely am interested in football. I have lots of other things I'm interested in, including, religion, theology, but football is one of them. I'm a fan. That's all it is.
That's why I asked you, yeah.
Yeah, when this podcast came around and it was proposed to you, Simon, you needed a co-host, we thought it would be a good idea to do this. Not for DEI reasons, I hope. But maybe if this was in Trump's America, I'd be accused of being a DEI candidate.
Yeah. If Trump were commenting on our podcast, he'd say... If
Trump listens, he'd be like, she's DEI candidate.
Yeah, definitely DEI hire. Yeah.
DEI hire.
Yeah. He said Simon should have got another white guy.
Yeah. There are not enough two white guys on a podcast. I mean, it's a unique idea. I've never heard of it. It's not going to work. It will never work. And I guess through the process of recording this podcast, we now see each other much more and probably learn more about the quirks of our personalities. But it's a huge amount of fun. And I think we haven't wanted to kill each other yet. So it's all good.
No, strangely not. It's been okay.
It's been good. And, okay, to finally finish, we had loads of questions from lots of people on X and Instagram about Jose Mourinho, about why he's special. Can you explain his character, the rise and fall? And I'm just going to give you a bit of a teaser because we have a 2-part special on Jose Mourinho coming up in the next few weeks where we dissect the man, the myth, the legend of Mourinho. It's not a rise and a fall. We're going to call it a rise, fall, and a redemption, about what I think is truly one of the most fascinating people in football in the 21st century. Simon and I, of course, are going to disagree again on our characterizations. I think assiduous listeners will have already realized that I have a huge soft spot for this man who keeps coming in and out of my life. I've almost grown up with him as a constant in my life from my teenage years to right now. And so, yeah, that's something definitely to look forward to. We had a huge amount of fun recording it, and I hope you will do too, listening to it.
Thank you, everyone, for being part of the official H&H Supporters Club. Yes, you are a member, even if you didn't know it. Thank you all for your questions, and we will be doing these more often. Remember to follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok, because that's where you can send us messages and watch highlights of every podcast and every argument. Sign up for the newsletter on our website, heroesandhumans.com, for exclusive updates only for you.
Thanks again for all your brilliant questions. We'll be doing this again, and remember to follow us on all your favourite podcast platforms. This show was developed by Immaterial and produced by One Fine Play. Matt Cheney is the series producer. Kazra Firuzia is the editor and producer. We have been your hosts, Mehreen Khan
and Simon Kuper.
And this has been Heroes and Humans of Football.